Hi, welcome back to our study, Connecting the Dots of Postmodernism. We just finished the first section of the study, covered through session 1 through 5. In session 6, we will look at how race and ethnicity became the backdoor through which postmodernism snuck into American society to emerge as the reigning paradigm that allows no dissent. I want to change a couple words. How cultural relativism became the backdoor through which postmodernism snuck into American society to emerge as the reigning paradigm that allows no dissent. Okay, let me go back here. I add a couple more guys, Schleiermacher and Lessing. So these were the fathers of the Enlightenment. They said Western values are universal values. To help the rest of mankind, they went and colonized them in the name of we're going to share our light with the rest of the world in darkness. So it begot imperialism and colonialism. Now, when you look at these 6 people, and there are more, there are 2 people that are missing. 2 names that are very, very renowned that are not in this group because they don't belong in this group, even though they were part of this generation. One is Jacques Rousseau of France, died in 1778, and Nietzsche, who died in 1900. You have to get to know these 2 people. Rousseau is not as famous as Nietzsche. Without Rousseau, we don't have Nietzsche in America. Nietzsche cannot get to America without the help of Rousseau. They broke from the Enlightenment. They're not part of the Enlightenment. They broke away from them. I'm going to explain to you why. Now, that's right. So Nietzsche is called the true father of postmodernism. Why? Because he rejected faith and reason. He rejected enlightenment, denied the existence of the universal truths, and discarded traditional religion and morality. For him, it was because God is dead. And he was most consistent atheist. If God is dead, then I don't have to live by the morality of Christians. So I make my own law. So he lived as if there's no God. Whereas other atheists, they live as if there is God, even though they say there's no God. That's why Schaeffer said he was most consistent atheist. So he said, there is no truth, universal truth. Everything is actually regional, relative. There's no such thing as absolute universals. However, without Rousseau's contribution, Nietzsche's postmodernism doesn't make waves in the United States. Rousseau is called the father of Romanticism. That's kind of odd because he was right in the middle of Enlightenment, and Romanticism will not emerge for another 100 years. But he already had espoused romantic ideas because he saw Enlightenment and he did not like it. But it is what he said that paved the way for postmodernism. In short, he inverted the racial hierarchy. He put the white man in the second place and non-white people in the first place. And he was not an anthropologist. He never went to Africa or any other nation other than places where people who look like him lived. But he romanticized people who were non-white living far away in some remote island. Why? First of all, his anthropology, he said humans are born with potential for goodness. He thought that we were born at worst neutral, good at best. But we get corrupted. But what corrupts us? Civilization makes humans bad, makes us envious. So enlightenment, science, knowledge, reason, and Rousseau, no. Those are things that make people bad. Therefore, the primitive men are cultural superiors to Westerners because their life is one with nature and free of guilt. It's amazing how that idea, that big idea, is going to influence, about 150 years later, American anthropology. He conceptualized the idea of noble savage. Noble savage. There are people who maintain their purity, living somewhere in the jungle, faraway island, the noble savage. In 1900s, 2 anthropologists left America to look for that noble savage. This is Margaret Mead, coming of age, 1928. This book influenced the way people were brought up in this world. Her teacher, she went to Barnard College, her teacher was Ruth Benedict. And she wrote a book called Pattern of Culture, and both were disciples of Franz Boas. Franz Boas is called the father of American anthropology. You know the dot? So I mentioned Nietzsche, the father of postmodernism. Rousseau, father of Romanticism. Franz Boas was father of American anthropology. He was a German anthropologist who escaped from Nazi, and he founded the #1 school of anthropology in Columbia University. And these two women set out to look for the noble savage. These two people were very famous, public intellectuals, as they call it, a household name in America, perhaps the most famous anthropologist in the world at that time. Of Ruth Benedict, it was said she was the foremost anthropologist, and their books sold millions of copies. This is book on anthropology. I have both books. They're not fun reading. Well, actually, coming of age is literally pornographic anthropology. You see, talking about the postmodern network power is academia. They set the engine of postmodernity in motion. It is the motion that set in that began to create the postmodern Kool-Aid from which generations of intellectuals have drunk, until critical mass have control over institutions. Do I sound like conspiracy theorists? No, I'm not. And it was these two people who set the tone. What am I saying? I'm suggesting that these two social scientists, anthropologists, initiated the ideological tone for the later emergence of moral pluralism of the 1960s, sexual revolution, and cultural pluralism of the 1990s, that is, multiculturalism, which is tantamount to critical race theory. And finally, there's no universal truth of postmodernism of today in its militant form. You see, they said, we found them, we found the noble savage. Denis de Souza, in one of his books, said this: for Mead, the Samoans were a contemporary example of Rousseau's noble savage. Oh, here is non-Westerners unencumbered by science and education, but they are so noble. Why? Well, there were people whom Westerners could envy and try to emulate. They were not racial inferiors, but cultural superiors. Let's decode this. What were they doing that made us feel like they were cultural superiors? From the outset, the invoking of non-Western culture and people was a means to an end. I think that this is the most significant statement I'm going to make during this presentation. From the outset, invoking of non-Western culture and people as the victims of imperialism and whatnot was always a means to an entirely different end. What do you mean by that? You see, the end goal wasn't about being tolerant of non-Western people and respecting their cultures, but to leverage their alleged cultural practices to relativize and neutralize traditional and biblical morality. That was the end game from the get-go. It was cultural anthropology that was used as a powerful tool to KO traditional and biblical morality. In other words, non-Western culture is pro-homosexuality and pro-transgender. They were already dealing with transgenderism in 1930 without using the term, because that term did not exist back then. You know what the irony is? I read these books in 1990s because we weren't thinking about transgenderism. When I read these, I never thought about anything. This time I read it, it's right here. 1924, 1930. They were pushing this already in the name of cultural anthropology. But furthermore, pro-non-white people is to be pro-homosexuality and pro-genderism. Without ethnicity and race, homosexuality and genderism cannot be part of dominant paradigm. They need help. And that got the help from pushing the culture of non-white people as superior, one from which we can learn and imitate their ways. Now, that's what I said. I have to prove it, right? So why don't you read with me what these people wrote. Margaret Mead, page 165. The casual homosexual practices are the usual manifestations of most associations between young people of the same sex. This is Samoa in 1920s. Really? Samoan scope at tales of lifelong devotion. Many adulteries occurred which hardly threaten the continuity of established relationship. In all of these comparisons between Samoan and American culture, our attitude towards our own solution must be greatly broadened and deepened by a consideration of the way in which other peoples have met the same problem. Realizing that our own ways are not humanly inevitable nor God-ordained, but are the fruit of long and turbulent history. We may well examine in turn all our institutions, family, school, government, church, marriage, thrown into strong relief against the history of other civilizations, noble savage, and weighing them in balance and be not afraid to find them wanting. Ruth Benedict, she went to Colorado and studied the Pueblo Indians in 1930s. She made this stunning statement. We have only to turn to other cultures to realize that homosexuals have by no means been inadequate for the social situation. For the American Indians, homosexuals are often regarded as exceptionally able. Right after that, Benedict turns to transgenderism without using the term and then praises it. I read this before. I never think it was that important. This time, my eyes were open. This is what she wrote. Right after she said homosexuality is exceptional and all that, she said this. In most of North America, there exists the institution of the Beldoc. It's a French, I probably mispronounced it. These men and women were regarded as good healers, the genial organizers of social affairs. They were socially placed. One of the best known of all the Zunis, the man-woman Wiwa, was certainly the strongest person in Zuni, both mentally and physically, a chief personage and leader in all kinds of craft. We found the noble savage. They began making a postmodern Kool-Aid in the 20s and 30s, and that current has been inundating our institution, and now we are beyond having critical mass. If you want to know why this happened, why, you go back to Rousseau, go back to Nietzsche, and these two women who went out and looked for the little savage, came back, wrote books, sold millions of copies, and not only that, it began to color social science. Social science is inexact science, but they won. Natural science, physical science, hard science, they lost. Social science in general and anthropology, they have won. Again, for them, pro-Western culture is being pro-homosexuality in transgenderism. In America, it happened on the back of black people. We should really sympathize with black people, because all the indication that I've seen, they have been used for the agendas of other people. They've been promised so many things, but they've been used up again and again, hoping that this time they will keep their promise. This is to say, for Nietzsche, there are no universals, postmodernism, to land in America through the back door. And so Charles Colson, who passed away 10 years ago, defined postmodern America in the following manner. The core of postmodernism is a rejection of universal truths, claim, and moral principles. No one is permitted to judge another group's action or belief because there is no recognition of ultimate truths binding on everyone. For this to be reality in America, Nietzsche has to enter through the back door, and that back door is through the noble savage, through noble blacks, through the narrative and the reality of oppressed blacks. But when the Nietzsche is let in through the back door, the conservative blacks disappear. It becomes about same-sex, no nuclear family, use of the police, no binary gender. And black people, hey, what about us? BLM. I'm going to prove to you that this is their plot. You know, Reverend Sharpton? But even he said, you know, those people who say this is the police, those are latte liberals up in Northeast. But black people know that they need police. They go through the back door of Noble Savage, oppressed black people. Once they get in, same-sex marriage, black people, what? We about same-sex marriage? Non-binary gender? No nuclear family? These are the police? This is not what we want. Well, I mean, that's what we want. That concludes the 6th session. Now, take a moment to consider the discussion questions. In the following session, number 7, we will address the watershed moment when postmodernism became a mighty force in America on the back of civil rights movement.